When you end watching this video, please tell me what the reason for it was, so that I can improve. Otherwise, hi and welcome. I'm trying to learn history, today food, and after we've done it, we're gonna do, I just said a name, we're gonna do some fitness. And that fitness is gonna be squat training. And if you participate in the squat training, then it's at your own risk. And this is the third part to food, and now we're trying to make the final gathering and sorting and memorizing of these informations here about food of the ancient times to make then a presentation out of memory out of it. So we're having that people started to use fire 1.5 million years ago, and that was at Squattraining in South Africa. That's the oldest one found. And when we're having 20,000 years ago in the region of Ukraine, there were hot coals in a pit used. And then 5,000 years ago, the Sumers and Egyptians, they had ovens with stone above them or something like that. It's not written like what here. Grains, then here we're having the next thing is that grain seeds were cooked with water together. Cooked and mixed, that's important. They were already cooked. So grain seeds were cooked. And that were no gruel or porridge. And then 20,000 years ago, the people started to bake the gruel, and now we had the first form of bread, pita. And now here the other thing. And also 5,000 years ago, 20,000. So 20,000 the bread, and 5,000 years ago, same as the ovens. At the same time, the first real ovens were used, Sumer and Egypt. And now 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians found that by leaving gruel to ferment, they could make a dough. They baked this in ovens to make the first raised bread. Okay, 5,000 years ago, bread also in Egyptian, then the letting it ferment. And the gruel to ferment and making dough. Then the next thing, pottery. 13,000 years old in Japan, in Oda Yamamoto. And with that, liquids could be heated, but they had already cooking 20,000 years ago, before 20,000 years ago. So first they were cooking the gruel, and then 20,000 years ago they were baking it on a hot stone to make pita or bread, and then 5,000 years ago the first real ovens, and at the same time the fermentation to making dough out of the bread in Egypt. 13,000 years ago the pottery to make liquids, to cook liquids, to boil liquids. Or to make stews, 13,000 years ago, pottery to make stews. The Romans were going into shops, or could go to shops, they were called popine. If we say it, popine, they could buy cheese and bread and fruit and meat. Bread, cheese, fruit, meat. And 12,000 years ago, when the fermentation of milk into cheese and of grapes into wine. Letting it ferment, and then the things. And 10,000 years ago, people started to hold animals, to eat the meat from the animals, and also to plant cereals. 6,000 years ago, in Palestine, people were making out of olive trees, the olive fruits, the olive oil, and that was 6,000. And then 5,000 Egypt, the first ovens in Sumer in Egypt, and also the Egyptian dough. And when we're having honey, also in Egypt, to sweeten honey from bees, they were holding bees to make honey. And the oldest receipt book, 4,000 years ago, is Syrian. 25 receipts are in it. For example, how a bird called turu is cooked with onion, garlic, milk, and spices. But I don't think I'm going to say it. Bread was the first food to be processed, because this gruel was now baked. The baking process of this is a bit complicated. We 20,000 years ago the first hot coals in a pit. Nothing written forward, just the hot coals. 5,000 years ago the bread, also the raising in Egypt, and the first ovens. That was the first processed food. Bread was the first processed food made by baking ground up grass seeds mixed with water. So, not bread, but technically the gruel. Okay, bread. And it was made. And the gruel was made before 20,000 years ago already. 20,000 years ago, that gruel was made then on hot stones to make pita. I can't get the thing with the bread clear. Okay, they had, some time ago, 25,000 years ago, they had grain seeds, they were cooking them, grain seeds with water cooked. Then 20,000 years ago, they had them on the flat stone to make pita, the first form of bread. Nothing written to who, beyond what. Then 25,000 years ago, the people had the hot coal things, hot coal pits. Nothing said for what. Then 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians in Sumer had the first stone ovens, real ovens, and also the dough. And that was the dough. And what was our first form of bread? I'm not sure if I have it exactly here, actually. Okay, we're going to stay not completely clear on it. Bread was the first processed food. And the Romans, that when we're having 12,000 we're having who? 12,000 fermentation, just fermentation. Then 10,000 agriculture and farming, and 6,000 the olive trees, and then honey also in Egypt, and receipt book Assyria 4,000. Let's start with camera and try to say it. Food during the ancient times. 1.5 million years ago, at Squattraining in South Africa, where the people that was discovered using fire to cook. So there was fire used 1.5 million years ago. And then also 20,000 years ago, there was in the region of Ukraine the first usage of hot coals in a pit. And then also 5,000 years ago, that was then improved in Egypt and by the Sumers to make it with actually ovens, and also the Egyptians at that time were able to ferment bread and making a dough and bake food. And bread was also the first processed food. Now, already 20,000 years ago or more, people were having grain seeds together with water cooked to make gruel or porridge. And when they discovered 20,000 years ago that they can make them on flat, hot stones to make pita, a form of bread. Now, 13,000 years ago, pottery was developed, and in Japan, people were using that 11,000 years ago in Iran. And they could now make liquids, they could make stew. The Romans, 2,000 years ago, they could go to popina shops, and where they could buy bread and cheese and fruit and meat. Now, 12,000 years ago, where the people started to let milk ferment to make cheese and grapes to ferment to make wine. 10,000 years ago, the first humans were holding animals to have meat from the animals, and also where they now planting, they were doing agriculture, they were doing farming, they started to farm. 6,000 years ago in the region of Palestine, people had olive trees, and out of the olives, they were making olive oil. And also the Egyptians, they had also bees, and they were now making honey from the bees to sweeten, and also out of fruits they were making syrup. And the Assyrians in the region of Iran, they had made 4,000 years ago the first known receipt book with 20 receipts in it. And that is according to MyScale's World History book on the page 146 and 147. I think it must be maybe one or two details, but it's not important. I'm going to stop the camera now. And that was the history part 2, food. If you were here for history, you can go directly to the next part of history, where we will continue with something in history. If you stay here and participate in the, what I again forgot, in the Squattraining, then it's very honest. We are bringing one leg up, we're pulling the leg up and pointing with the toes down. Other leg up, pull the leg up, point with the toes down, relax the leg. And a leg to the side. Point with the toes in front and stretch the inner side of the leg. Over to the outside. And now go from side to side. And now do a squat, legs wide apart. And we're doing 12 of them. So first one, down and up, and to number 2, and directly 3, and now number 4, and 5, and the next one you're going to go half, 6. Let's start strong in the second half with 8 already. Let's make the 10 full with 9 and 10, and not just 1 and 2 more. So, and now the 6-pack squat squeeze exercise. Legs wide apart, go a bit down into quarter squat and press against the top part of the leg. And on the other side. Down into half squat and press against the middle part of the leg. And the other side. And down into 3/4 squat and press close to the knee. And on the other side. And up again. Next exercise is the fastest giraffe of the water pond. Down into 3/4 squat. Press against the knee. And go towards it. On the other side. Press. And go towards it again. Press. Go towards it and again. And 2 more. And one last. And up. Last exercise, the propeller. Down into full squat. Arms to the side. Elbow to one side. Press against the leg and look up to the head. Little bend in the elbow. Into the middle, over to the other side. Press against the leg and look up to the head. To the middle. And the walk. Walk a bit over the legs. And pull the leg first up. Pull the leg again up. And the other one. Now the garden gnome, heel onto the ground, pull the heel in and move the leg from left to right. Upper heel onto the ground, pull the toes in and move the leg from left to right. And the crane, the animal, take the leg at the ankle, make a straight back and point with the knee onto the ground. Upper leg, straight back, knee down to the ground. And legs wide apart, and we're doing the trunk catalyst. Breathe in, out. And breathe in, out. In and up. Out and down. Breathe in and close the legs. And breathe in, out. That was squat training. Thank you very much, and until next time.